Have you ever noticed how some people simply disappear? It's not that they warn you. It's not drama. It's not an argument. They just vanish for a few days. The messages sit there, read or not even opened. Their status disappears. The online indicator never shows up. And on the other side, there's that strange feeling, did I do something wrong? Did something happen? Why does this person do this? The most common explanation we hear is laziness, lack of interest, coldness, or inconsideration. But psychology is rarely that simple. Most of the time, the person who disappears isn't running away from you. They are trying to survive themselves. Imagine the mind as a room full of open tabs, like a browser that's never been closed. Thoughts, expectations, guilt, memories, tasks, undigested emotions. For some people, being constantly connected feels like keeping all those tabs flashing at the same time. At some point, the brain cries for help. And the easiest button to press isn't explain, it's disappear. People who vanish for days often have a very particular relationship with their inner world. They feel everything more intensely than they show. They don't ignore messages because they don't care. Many times, they ignore them because they care too much. Replying takes emotional energy. It takes presence. It takes a version of themselves that, at that moment, simply isn't available. There's a well-studied phenomenon in psychology called emotional overload. When the brain realizes there are too many stimuli, social, emotional, cognitive, it activates self-protection mechanisms. One of them is temporary isolation, not as a punishment for others, but as an anesthetic for the self. Think about someone who spends the entire day being functional. They work, solve problems, meet expectations, maintain an image of control. When night finally comes, the body is there, but the mind has already spent everything it had. Any interaction turns into another silent demand. Even a simple message like, "Hi, how are you?" can sound, internally, like deliver an organized version of yourself now. And sometimes that version doesn't exist. There's also a curious detail. Many of these people wouldn't disappear if they knew how to come back. The problem isn't leaving. It's returning. Because returning requires explanation. And explaining confusing feelings is one of the hardest things for the human brain to do. There's also a strong link between this behavior and highly introspective people. Don't confuse introspection with shyness. The introspective person isn't afraid of people. They get tired of them. Not because people are bad, but because every interaction requires deep processing. While some people speak in order to think, others need to think in order to speak. And thinking is exhausting. It's as if these people live with a more sensitive emotional filter. They pick up on microtensions, shifts in tone, unspoken expectations. Their brain is constantly interpreting invisible signals. This creates a kind of fatigue that doesn't show up in the body, but weighs heavily on the mind. Disappearing, in this case, is turning the volume of the world down. Now let's touch on a delicate point. Not every disappearance is healthy. Sometimes it comes from past experiences. People who grew up in environments where their emotions were ignored, invalidated, or used against them learn early on that explaining feelings doesn't bring relief, it brings trouble. So the brain associates emotional closeness with risk. Distance becomes safety. That's why some people disappear precisely when they start to get attached. When the relationship becomes more intimate, more real, more meaningful. The bond activates old, unresolved memories, and the nervous system switches into defense mode. Disappearing becomes a reflex, not a conscious decision. Curiously, these same people often return as if nothing happened. Not because they don't notice the impact, but because, for them, the distance was a moment of internal reorganization. They didn't experience the disappearance as rejection, but as a pause. They just forget that, on the other side, someone was waiting for answers that never came. There's also a little discussed neurological factor, the difficulty of switching mental states. Some people struggle more to move from an introspective mode to a social one. When they turn inward, it's as if the door gets stuck. Coming back requires effort, planning, emotional courage. It's not laziness. It's internal friction. And before you think, so everything is justified. No. Psychology isn't an excuse, it's an explanation. Understanding the mechanism doesn't erase the impact. People who disappear do hurt others too. But understanding changes the narrative. It moves from "this person doesn't care" to "this person is silently struggling with something they don't know how to communicate." Now, if you're someone who tends to disappear, you might be recognizing yourself here. Maybe you felt guilty about it, or ashamed, or afraid of being seen as cold, distant, difficult. But let me tell you something important. Your need for silence isn't a flaw. The problem isn't needing to disappear. The problem is not knowing how to stay without losing yourself. The path isn't becoming hyper-available. It's learning micropresences, small signals, or "I'm going to be quiet for a few days." It's nothing personal. A short message that doesn't demand conversation, but offers context. This reduces the other person's anxiety and eases your internal guilt. The brain loves clarity in expectations. And if you're the person on the other side, waiting, wondering, blaming yourself, this text might be for you too. Not every silence is rejection. Not every distance is lack of love. Sometimes it's just someone trying to organize an inner world that no one else can see. Psychology reminds us that every behavior has a function. Disappearing, for many, is a request for space that never learned how to become words. It's a rudimentary emotional language, but a functional one, until the day the person learns another. In the end, understanding this changes the way you interpret the world. You start listening to silence with less personalization and more curiosity. You ask less "what did I do wrong?" and more "what is this person trying to deal with on their own?" Maybe the most honest question isn't "why do some people disappear?" but "what does the world demand of them that makes them need to disappear?" And when you start seeing it from that angle, something shifts. Judgment softens, empathy grows, and behavior, little by little, finds space to change. If this topic touched something inside you, it might be worth reflecting. Do you disappear, or do you wait? And what does that say about the ways you learn to protect yourself? If you feel like it, share in the comments whether you've been on one side or the other of this story. Sometimes realizing we're not alone is already the first step towards not needing to disappear so much.